What's up, software developers? If you are using Postman in your day-to-day workflow or even just intermittently, chances are you are underutilizing it pretty heavily. So, Postman is an API testing tool at the most succinct definition, but it is so much more than that. It's an organization utility. It allows for some really cool advanced features like data generation and automation and general API testing. So it goes pretty in depth. And a lot of these features you may have never encountered before. But if you have, well, here are some just good organization tips that really might help expedite your general workflow. So let's go ahead and hop over into Postman and check it out. Workspaces. Workspaces are a way of logically grouping a bunch of projects together. I'm currently in my Hello YouTube one, which does not have any projects in it yet. As I continue doing YouTube series, this will expand a little bit more, but for now, we have no projects yet to put in it. However, if we want to take a peek at my menu, let's look at what I use in my workspaces and see what kind of logical groupings I have. I have my workspace, which is where I test all of my own personal projects. That used to be just the default one that I dumped every collection into, which got very messy and very out of hand, and I was underutilizing the workspaces feature. So I really needed to transition over to using it a little better. So my workspace is now just for personal projects. Demonstrations is for my daily instruction. When I'm teaching students, I will do all of my API testing within this workspace. And I also have a separate distinct students tab over here, which that I reserve for lab reviews for students' projects, or maybe if a student has asked for some assistance in debugging an application with their API, well, I can utilize it here. The cool part about workspaces is they can be private or they can be a team one, meaning I can share this Hello YouTube URL with anybody. And that means that you can link that up in your Postman collection. So we can collaboratively work on the same collection together. And that would be a really handy feature to utilize in an organization versus maybe exporting a collection to a JSON file and committing it to part of your repo. And yet again, that's a collection by collection thing. You would have to do that for every collection within your workspace. So that would be really, really messy. So being able to collaboratively work in this same unified shared workspace, incredibly handy for organizations. We also have environments, which allow me to selectively toggle, am I working in a personal environment or a staging or production environment? And that way you can use variables and URLs and use different, credentials or keys. Maybe you're using some kind of third-party service that requires, a testing key versus a production key. And so this would actually allow you to quickly toggle back and forth between those. I actually kind of underutilize that, but that is a pretty nifty feature that you could use to help selectively manage environments. So we've looked at environments and workspaces. Collections. A collection you can designate as pretty much a folder for requests within a project. And the way I typically structure mine is I like to mirror my API routes structure, but in folder form. And so I have a fake blogs project that I've been working on with some students who are working with authentication, which provides for a great API to test with. So I'm going to name this, blogs for YouTube. And that's the name of my project. And within it, I know it seems weird, but I'm going to make two distinct folders. I have an API path for API routes, And I also have an auth set of routes. So I know that seems kind of weird, but mentally I really, really, really like reading my paths like that. And so let's go ahead and make some requests. So in order to add a request, I'm going to go ahead and just create a new request. And if you have your server paths named adequately, you almost have self-documenting requests within your collection. Like, for example, I just named this request slash blogs, but I do have that folder path here, kind of designating what exactly is being fetched here. And so this reads as get slash API slash blogs, and it's a pretty intuitive title. Sometimes I do like to add additional information, especially if I'm dealing with tests. And so I might add some extra context here, like unauthenticated. This is a public URL, and therefore anybody can access it. So I'll go ahead and save it. And by the way, once you're done, close out of some folders. I cannot overemphasize that tip. Or even with just regular development, when you're working in your development environment, if you're not actively working on a file, close out of it. I like to keep maybe no more than 2 to 3 files open at a time. It just contributes to some visual clutter and makes it a little harder to work, in my opinion. Same thing goes for Postman. Like, make sure you save and close out of your tabs when you're finished testing a feature. But I will go ahead and oh, whoops, never mind. I did put authorization on getting all blogs. So let's go ahead and make my login request so I can actually get some credentials here. I can show you how we can expedite some stuff pretty well. So I need to make a post request to my login route. And that's going to be to /auth/login, which yet again, I like to have my path names kind of speak for themselves. This is a post request to /auth/login. So, mentally when I'm debugging my API, I can look at my routes within VS Code, and I can just pop over to my collection and look at everything very, very easily. So I'm using some JSON placeholder data. So I forget the email, but the password is going to be Hunter2 for all of my classic development and instruction purposes. So let me go ahead and grab that email, and I will be back in 1 second. And we're back. So I've got philiploish79@hotmail.com. This is not an email I created myself, rather it's actually something I automatically generated with Postman, but we'll see how that feature can be applied in a different way. So I can run this, and my API will respond with nice and respond with a token itself. So I need to copy this, and in order to apply authentication or authorization to a request, which I guess I need to rename this to authenticated since it actually does require it. Let's go ahead and change that up. We can set the header ourselves manually. However, Postman does have a distinct tab for authentication, so I like just using that. By default, it's going to inherit the authentication from its parent folder or collection. And so since I actually do have this nested in a folder, it's trying to get whatever API that folder has, which that I've not set any sort of authentication of its own, so therefore it falls back to YouTube. But this collection itself also does not have any, so it's just not using authentication at all. So that's just its default setting, saying like, hey, if your parent has something set up, I'm going to try to use that. But for now, before we get into automating the token we'll come here and just paste that in. And so now I can successfully make these lovely, the request to get these lovely blogs, which right now I just have an empty string and endless screaming into the void of ah. So just a quick 2 blog posts that I made in the database in order to get some data up for my students. So we've got that established, and I'm pretty sure the rest of my routes here do require authentication for the blogs route. So in order to create a blog, I do need the ability to have my token applied. So this is going to say, you know, I duplicated it, so it's going to have the bearer token, and it's going to have this specific token applied. Did not mean to duplicate that a second time. Oh no, I tried to delete and I duplicated it a third time. What a menace. And here I am, yet again, just kind of trying to follow out my typical API route structure. So I do have a placeholder variable here in the title for this, designating that this is going to be a singular blog. And let's see. I need to rename that from blog to blogs. I also need to make a GET request to API/blogs again so I can get the URL, sorry, the ID of one. I'll get the endless screaming. And there we go. So Postman is able to apply that. What about if I wanted to create or update or delete one? Well, you know, we can quickly add that request as well. And you know, all of these are going to be authenticator routes, so I really should name the folder that and kind of continue with that inheritance model, saying like, yo, all of these should require authentication. And if that's the case, and we just talked about inheritance, you know, it seems a little cumbersome that we should have to repeat the same stuff over and over again, right? Let's see. I need to grab one of my user IDs just so I can have something to stick to a specific user. I think these are both from Philip Loischka, so he's going to be the author of all of that. Now, I want some variants in my application here. I don't want the same like garbage, you know, empty string. So this is a massive, 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 wonderful feature of Postman. You can use their integration of the Faker.js library to add in fake data to your requests. They have a litany of randomized strings or values that you can apply into your requests. So I'm actually going to start utilizing some of them. With Postman, you can inject variables. You can interpolate them with mustache casing, double set of curly braces. And to use Faker.js, or their integration of it rather, we need a $, which prompts their, you know, auto-completion menu. And I'm going to start looking at phrases. I'm just going to type out phrase to get some of those. Or actually, I think there's a jargon. Not random. Random. We'll go with random. Go with random catchphrase, and you know what? We'll do random phrase to you. Because one of them is like goofy tech words and like garbage jargon that I really, really like using. I just forget which one is which. So we're going to use both here and just see which half of the string looks better. But hey, I can now just make a bunch of requests, and formerly my get all blogs, that only had a couple of blogs, but here I can just run that. Whoops. I need to make this authenticated, and you know what? I need to grab my token, my current valid token, so I have to go to a previous request and paste that here, which I think we're starting to see a pattern. Like, this is pretty annoying, that I have to, keep on copy pasting a token. What happens when that token expires? Frequently, when I'm creating demonstrations for students, I have short-lived tokens, maybe 2 to 5 minutes, just to show, what happens when a token expires. And it'd be kind of annoying to have to log in and reapply that token again. So let's see how we can start moving this to a single source of truth, making it a little nicer to work with. Now, you may have seen me as I was speaking run like a dozen or so requests in the background, and yeah, I mean, Postman was doing a bunch of work for me in the background, just creating a bunch of random blogs. So we had just our regular ones, and now we have all of these garbage tech jargon. Reactive Executive Help Desk, the ADP interfaces, synergized asynchronous budgetary management, if we shareable third-generation matrices transmitting the switchable discrete support use the neutral THS circ, and they're also like truncated just because I'm mapping over this data and providing a substring of content for getting all. In order to see the full one, you have to request a whole blog, so we'll go look at that. So yeah, this is the random catchphrase garbage, but I love it. It just makes stuff a little nicer to work with. You don't have to keep on making up content. You can just have some lorem ipsum stuff basically be placeholders. And you saw how many items populated that menu. You can have fake user demographic data populate. So it's a really easy way to seed some stuff. And I'll show you guys in a later video how we can make that a little more automated, how you can make Postman run a request or a series of requests hundreds of times. And that is super invaluable because all you have to do is set up your collection, set up a request with some fake data, and then run that post request, And it's not a manual run. You literally just say like, hey, input panel, how many times do you want to run this series of requests? Like 250? Great. It's going to hit up your API 250 times with that fake randomized data. And so you'll have a database to start, your application with very early on. So it's really, really handy establishing that. But we have seen something that's a little cumbersome. Copying and pasting all of this token everywhere. When we saw that, we really could define a single source of truth for this almost. The API folder, and we could even make this a little nicer. I have all of my routes with blogs in it, but really, what if I had some subroutes? What if I had, in addition to API/blogs, I had like API/pizzas? Well, for all of my blog routes, they do require authentication. So let me kind of modularize things a little bit. Create a new blogs folder here. Move my blog routes into it, and I'm going to rename them too real quick just because it would bother me if I had nested paths. Now, if I wanted to require all blogs to have authentication, which I do in the API, I should place authorization on the entire folder. And so a folder will still try to get whatever authorization its parent folder has. However, for blogs, we can set up the blog itself to hold this bearer token. And that means that for my post request, I just say inherit auth, save and close, get one auth, inherit from parent, close, go to get all blogs, inherit auth from parent, and we see here, this request is using the bearer token from the folder /blogs. So we have that single source of truth. Oops, didn't save that, did I? Inherit. Yep. So this blogs folder, if I want to change up the token being utilized for any of these 3 requests, like what if I wanted to change which user was making a request? Well, I just log in with different credentials and I copy paste that token and apply it to blogs, that single one established spot here. But that could be still a little cumbersome, because I know as small of an application that we've been working on, we have just this one folder. But what if we had more? What if I had pizzas as an API route? What if I had users as an API route? I would hate having to do what I just did here, which was, instead of copy pasting a token across requests, what if I wanted to copy paste them across folders? It would get really out of sync really quickly. And so you might say like, hey, well, what if you just put the credentials here at API, or what if you put them up here at the top of the collection, blogs for YouTube? And yeah, we could actually do that. That would be the really easy way of establishing auth from the get-go. And in fact, everything by default inherits auth from the parent. So to start, you could make your entire collection have auth bearer token, or whatever authentication methods that you're utilizing. I just happen to be using that for this application. But now I just paste that token in here, and everything downstream that inherits auth from parent will send in that authorization header with the request itself. And so whenever I need to log back in and get a new token again, I run that, copy paste, or heck, let me make a quick code change to demonstrate this in action, and I'll be back in a second. Alright, I just coded out a very quick request in order to get the user's ID from the token. So just a quick API request /API/hello. And that's going to bounce the user's information back. Now, I have not put in any sort of authorization here. But by default, when you create one, it's going to inherit from the top level. It's going to keep on going up the chain. So I'm using a bearer token at blogs for YouTube. Hello looks at API. API says don't look at me. I'm using the authentication provided by blogs for YouTube, and therefore I automatically have my token applied. And so when I make my request, we get the string hello user blah blah blah. And if I were to look at the token itself in something like JSON web token, we'd be able to verify that this is the information encoded in the rec.user.id, or rather in the user object encoded in the payload. But we can see here that it's the the user ID beginning with B0434B. If I were to log in with a new name now, which I will go grab from my database momentarily, be back shortly. There we go, I've got it now. Logging in with a different JSON placeholder username. Yet again, these accounts were created with Postman. I can now get my token, and I want to simulate being another user. So I need to go take this token, come over to my collection and go to my auth settings here and paste it here. We just saw that, it's starting to get a little tedious if I wanted to switch over to different users, because I don't remember these email addresses. Do you? Probably not. This is your first time seeing it. So if there were a way I could maybe save these and toggle between them, that would be really handy. And it is also kind of getting annoying taking this token here and having to manually copy and paste it every time I want to update. But regardless, I am now Will Kessler 64. My previous token was for the Philip Loischka, whose user ID began with BO43B. But now when I log in again, we see that, oh, I've got a new user ID here. It was able to apply that new token when I ran this request just because I updated blogs for YouTube. But this is getting very, very, very cumbersome. So I need to figure something out a little better. I like things to be a little more automated. So how about we utilize the tests feature of Postman? Tests are something that runs after a response has been sent. It has ways of you validating both your request and the response. It also has the ability to take data from the response and set variables. So with Postman, we have variables at each stage. We have workspace variables, we have environment variables, and we have collection variables. And I want to create a collection variable that can hold my token. So let's go over to edit. And editing my collection, we come over here, we use the auth tab, but here I want to use the variables tab. I'm going to create a variable named token. And I'll initialize it with the value of pizza. It's going to get overridden pretty quickly anyway. But token is now our variable representing what will hold our token. So I can come back here to the authorization header and say apply the token variable there in place of having to manually copy paste that time and time again. And we see here that all of the variables that we used in Faker.js, they had the placeholders here. We see it's got a little G here. That's a globally scoped variable. That's something that Postman has available for us. We see I've got the little C logo down here for token, and that is my collection level variable that we just established. It's even showing me its current value, which is pizza, but we will have that updated shortly. So we've got authorization set to this token variable. And we've got the token variable initialized as pizza. If I try to make a request now, well, it's going to catastrophically fail because I'm unauthenticated. Because, pizza is not a valid JWT, so my server is going to be very unhappy with that. So I send a 401 and say unauthorized JWT malformed. So let's go fix that up real quick. Now I don't want to copy paste that into the variable here because yet again, that's not saving me any time whatsoever. I still copy a token from the login response, come to blogs for YouTube, and regardless of which one I click on, authorization or variables, I'm still manually pasting that. So this is garbage. I hate this. So instead, let's come to the test section here for the login request. And we'll get a little more into testing, but we can use the Postman collection variable library to set or get variables. And so if I get something from the response body, I can use it to set it to that token variable that I just got. And so over here, this is another video for another day, but this is a way where we can establish tests to make sure and validate that we have what we want. I'm just using it as a very quick way here to get some data. So I actually just want to grab the response body. And so you can peruse through the snippets here just to see a tiny amount of what's available. And usually speaking, when I'm doing API testing, I'm just validating that I have the right, response code that I'm expecting. I just make sure that I'm not missing any of the properties in my response body. I do sometimes validate the data within there. I do sometimes validate the response time just to make sure I don't have any sluggishness on a specific request. But I want to get the token from my response body, so I go ahead and destructure that. And then I set my token variable to whatever I just extracted out from the response body. And so my response body dot token is this string here. And now if we go look at our blogs for YouTube, there it is with our up-to-date information. So if I go to API hello, it's still that current user 3FB6C3 blah blah blah. If I log in as my different user, which I guess I need to send a property of other user until I start using variables for the this is a general user, the other guy is an admin, and so I need to have some kind of variable. Let's go ahead and do that now. I think it's Philip Loishka 79. Nope, that is not a valid user. I also need to work on my error handling for that. Let's go check out that user. Yet again, local database, fake users. I think I just misspelled Philip. Yeah, he only has one. Oh, and it's at hotmail.com. Cool. Well, now, thanks to the power of environment variables, I can just hit up admin user here and be able to switch this over from admin user to regular user pretty easily. And then, cool, I'm logged in as my admin user. I can come to get hello, and it's going to bounce back the ID here, so I can say 3FB6C3 blah blah blah. That's no more, that's the regular user. I will now start with 40 something, B04 something, so there we go. Now all we have to do is log in as a user, and we get a new token established for that specific user, and it updates authentication everywhere throughout our application. So that about wraps it up for part 1 of this, and we can now start looking into some more advanced features like automated data creation and testing, so that way I know that we just use the tests to, and I should remove authenticated from here. Kind of following that inheritance model, And I like setting up authenticated to help um, me when I'm writing tests as well. It's going to help me determine whether or not I should create, a test that passes upon authentication and fails upon no authentication. So that's just kind of some good mental distinguishment as well, having that there. But yeah, so we got to have a very quick glimpse into collection level variables. So now token and regular user and admin user are available everywhere within this collection, and I can utilize them more. Now the emails aren't really they're not really going to be something that I utilize anywhere else other than like the login route. Maybe, I don't know, maybe if I had like a user page or something, but I don't have that kind of setup on my API. So some applications of collection variables, which will be touched upon in the next video, are what if I want to run through a series of requests, like if I'm trying to test out my API and make sure everything's good? What if I want to create some kind of request? So let's say I write a blog and then I want to update a blog and then get that specific blog and delete it. Well, you can have Postman save the ID of that freshly created asset, so that way I can have it post, and if my body responds with the ID, which I normally do, well, you can save that ID as a variable like temp blog ID, and that way you can make a GET request to, if you have that saved as a collection variable, temp ID, and that means you hit up and grab that specific blog, you update that specific blog, you delete that specific blog, and no matter how many tests you run through, your data will still be in the pristine state that it was in before you ran your testing series. And so that's another cool little thing we can get into, but we will save that for another time. So I hope you enjoyed this kind of intermediate approach to Postman. Not really the sexiest utilization of it per se, but just good organization tips. So if you do have any questions, feel free to drop them in the comments. But I hope you enjoyed a lot of stuff from this and start utilizing your Postman a lot more effectively. All right, I'll catch you guys in the next part. See you later.